could stand here all day and we could get a long list of accomplishments that this man has made. But basically, I just want to tell you, and there's a whole lot I could tell you about him, but this is going to be just a real short, personal testimony. Because you the man. You know you the man. You the black man from the Nile. You know we love you too. You know that. This is just a personal testimony. But I want to tell them how you were one of the founding directors of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. I want to tell the people how you the chair of the Education Commission of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. I want to tell them about the intellectual thrust that you give the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. I want to tell them how you always practice mind. I want to tell them how you speak mind. That is truth, justice, righteousness, order, balance, reciprocity, and harmony. Then I want to tell them how you do mind. Is that you? And how the man is so brilliant and he ain't even arrogant with his knowledge. He does like the Tao Tip said, be not arrogant with your knowledge. It's the man following the instructions. Not only does the man know the instructions, not only is he a good listener, but he's a good speaker. And I'm not going to hold up one more minute because I want y'all to welcome this black man from the Nile. Stand up and tell him how much you love him. But he talks to us about man, about the answer,
Thank you very much. Hotep. To our Queen Mother. Thank you very much. The reason I came here, I don't know why you came, but the reason I came was so that I could be introduced by she has a way of pushing and supporting us so that we feel like we can do anything even if we can't. And half the time we wind up outdoing what we thought we could do because of that kind of support. So I'm very appreciative, and also especially appreciative of Nzinga's leadership for this association. When I say that, I know that everyone in this association who knows her knows that especially in the last few years that we owe to her the stability and direction for ASCAC. We can never forget it. I want to acknowledge our debt again to our two seminal leaders and inspirers, Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Barbados, and I got just an incredibly warm reception and connection to the conscious community of Barbados. And what they told me was that the reason that you get these kind of receptions is that Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark have been out there for years warming it up. So they prepared the way, and that was extremely important. I want to also acknowledge, I should acknowledge everybody, but we have these special deaths to Nzinga, but also to Baba Jake.
There you go. Yeah.
Cousin Jake. That very quiet and kind of low-key, but he's like an atomic force in this movement for definition and purpose, and keeps us ideologically on track, academically sound, spiritually focused, mobilized to do those things that we need to do in order to make sure, as he says, that we get out of this mess that we're in. The intellectual leader of the World History Project. You will find out, if you haven't read that book yet, that it is one of the most important books, in my opinion, of the 20th century, quite frankly. It is because of the clarification that appears in there. The clarification, especially of the, I think even the younger scholars, the Timothy Carr, Mario Beatty, and the Sister Valencia, clarification on feminism, and the clarification of Asa and others on what tools it's going to take to build our own house.
That's right.
The clarification of historiography of Anderson Thompson, the clarification of purpose by Jake, the clarification of who we are by Obinga. He answers the question, who am I? Which is the question. And until that question is answered appropriately, no other questions matter. And so you will find in this the thinking of the people who will help us to speak a language that is unconfused, that will give us the direction that we need, and is a challenge to those voices, and there are many, many of them look like us, who would take us away from ourselves, who would disunite us, who would destroy the solidarity of the African community. There are those who work for millions and millions of dollars. They get paid to say things about us and to do things to us, and they look like us.
That's right.
And so those are the ones that we have to worry about. They come to us in the vision of Armand in his book 2000 Seasons, when he speaks about Ascaris and the metaphor of those who work for the enemy. In the case of 2000 Seasons, you know that those Africans who had been turned in their goals so that they were alien to themselves, even anti-self, which means that they were anti-us. And so that's what the World History Project is about, to lay down a challenge. And if someone has a better way for Africans to go, then they ought to write that challenge down so we can see what they're thinking. I want to acknowledge the presence of my baby daughter. I have 4 Africans in my family. My children are all African. And my African baby daughter is here selling my African book. And I might add her African book. She got 2 books out there on her 2 daughters, my granddaughters, Luki and Dio. So my daughter is Nefertari Zoe Makeda, Hilliard Nunn. And she's married to an African who is at the, he's a professor on the law faculty at the University of Florida. And if you haven't read his book on Africans and the law, it's an article that's now published, but it's out in a pamphlet form. You need to look at that very carefully, how embedded in the law, to decode how white supremacy, we know it's in the law, but to have a lawyer break it down for you so you can see how the law perpetuates white supremacy. That piece you need to see. And then, of course, since we're in Baba Lynn's territory, we have to acknowledge the incredible work that he's been doing over all of these years and the personal sacrifices that he has made, and this Faculty of African Studies at City College has made in order to make a way for us. And so I'm happy that we're here. one little bit of administrivia. Some people have asked, and I'm not very good at promoting much of anything, including the books. I don't do very well in business and arrangements. But somebody's been asking how they could find out about the tour that we do to Kemet. My tour this year goes on Independence Day, 4th of July. We always leave on that day so that we can be independent. And if you're interested in that, it's the phone number is 404, area code 404-767-2727. 404-767-2727. And the thing asked me to talk about SEBA, which is in a way is to talk a little bit about the last book that I did, which is The Reawakening of the African Mind. SEBA, meaning teach and learn, deep thought, and all those things associated with taking charge of our own destiny. And the subtitle, of course, The Reawakening of the African Mind. And I'll talk about that a little bit too. But I want to talk about it not so much limited to the book, but springing from the book into the wider context that we have to think about at this time so that we can try to capitalize on the momentum that we have. Every day, this problem of the African mind, which to me is the problem. Yes. We have only one problem. Our economic problems stem from the absence of mind.
That's right. All right. That's right.
Our political problems stem from the absence of mind. Until we are clearly awake, and in our, as they said, my grandmother used to say, clothed in our right mind. Until you're clothed in your right mind, then there's absolutely no prospect of living, really. And there are many people who know that they have succeeded in making some of us zombies. And the purpose of a zombie is to take the mind and leave the body so that it can do the service for the person who dominates the other person. And there are people who intended to make us that way. They were very clear about it, and they still are clear about it. They have never stopped with that mission, especially the mission of the last 400 years of our subservience to Europe. That has been primarily the strategy of Europe, is to make sure that we did not have an African mind. That we had a mind that could do minimal things, but that not independent doing maximal things. Every day these minds that are tortured and destroyed are manifest. In San Francisco, some of you have heard about this, trying to find my glasses, there they are. I need my glasses to find my glasses. I wanted to read this article to you just to show you that Carter Woodson was right. This says, this was just in, this is just written Thursday. Mixed reviews for San Francisco school book plan. A proposal to overhaul required reading lists for students in San Francisco so that up to 7 of every 10 books would be by authors of color has drawn criticism. Now, what they're saying is that there's more books to read than European books. And that since San Francisco in particular has so many different ethnic groups, that there ought to be something so that everyone is indeed connected to the body of literature studied in school, because that authenticates literature. It says what is priority. It says what is legitimate. School board members Keith Jackson and Steve Phillips are pushing an initiative that would make the 2 white high school English curriculum more multicultural. Only 13% of the city's public school students are white, and the largest ethnic group is Chinese. But educators and students appear deeply divided over the measure's merits. At the city's flagship Lowell High School, if you live in San Francisco, you know Lowell High School was always known as the high school for gifted students. So this is the flagship institution. There is a veteran English teacher there named Gwendolyn Fuller, an African American. And that may be the problem. Said that she would quit teaching if she couldn't focus on the classics, such as The Great Gatsby, Lord of the Flies, and Catcher in the Rye. She said, I am outraged. Listen to this person. This African is outraged by this proposal, said Fuller, a Lowell High School English teacher for 28 years. You focus on the classics, and then you weave in books of color. It's not the other way around. Now, I don't have to say much about that here, but I'm just trying to point out that the problem of the mind, of the free mind, is a problem where we see things like that manifest every day. My brother Afri Cambone, and his wife are here from Trinidad. And he is at the core of the conscious community in Trinidad. When I was in Trinidad last, a young man came up to me after I spoke, and he said, what is this African business that you're talking about? He says, here we're not Africans. He said, we're Trinidadians. I said, oh, really? He said, yes. He says, and I've got a little bit of Asian, I've got a little bit of European, I've got a little bit of Indian in me, and I've got a little bit of African. And I said, well, young man, all of that may be true, but as I look at you, you look to be the spitting image of Kwame Nkrumah, which he did. And I said, but whatever you tell me, that is what you are, and I have to accept it. And I wish you well. There's no reason for you to do anything other than that what you want to do. But one question before I let you go. If you went to the meeting that Asians have when they're planning their future, would they agree?
All right.
Friday, I was at Morehouse College lecturing. A young lady came up to me after I lectured about this African thing again. And she said, well, you know, I just need to talk to you because, you know, I want to honor all my ancestry. I said, I don't have a problem with you honoring all your ancestry. She said, you know, I've got a lot of French in me, and I got to deal with this French part. You know, she said, I'm genetically African and genetically French.
Wow.
And I said, well, you can go ahead, if that's something that you want to be a matter of conflict, go ahead and do it. Let it be a matter of conflict. I said, but you know, the French that you're claiming had already been mixed with Africans for about 800 years.
That's right.
And I said, so I don't see them sitting down trying to figure out the genetics of their African ancestry so that they honor their African and their French ancestry at the same time. The only people seem to be confused about it are folk like us. I said, but if that's something that you want to preoccupy yourself with, that's fine. I said, but that's part and parcel of this whole problem of trying to organize around your genes rather than organizing around your creativities and your cultural tradition. I said, if you have 4 cultural traditions that you're equally loyal to, then that's called quadriphrenic. I'm a psychologist, so I talk in those terms. And a quadriphrenic can't go anywhere, because every time you get ready to make a decision, one is pulling you this way, one is pulling you, I don't know. And usually we have to put those people on medication. And then, of course, all the stories aren't the way you might think they would be. For example, some of you saw that there's this brother. He's been coming to ASCAC meetings, in fact. You saw him in jet. His name is Hefni, and he is from Aswan, Nubian, in Kemet. And this is the letter that he got from the Wayne County Intermediate School District. Dear Mr. Hefni, please be advised that the Michigan Department of Education collects racial and ethnic data as prescribed in Directive Number 15, Racial and Ethnic Standards for Federal Statistics and Administrative Reporting. This directive provides standard classification for record keeping, collection, and presentations of data on race and ethnicity in federal program administrative reporting and statistical activities. According to this directive, a white person is a person having origins in any one of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. Since you come from Egypt, a North African and Middle Eastern country, you are white, not black. So you are directed to change your classification on the race ethnic identification card. Please be advised that failure to do so will have serious repercussions for your career and will constitute insubordination, which may result in suspension and discharge.
That I know.
Mr. Hefney wrote back. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I got a 2-page letter, 3-page, 4-page letter the brother wrote back. Infuriated as he was. He said, I'm a naturalized American citizen of African ancestry, Nubian. My hair is kinky. My physical characteristics are clearly African. My complexion is as dark as that of most African Americans I have ever seen. I have never perceived, defined, or classified myself as a white man. The attached media coverage about me dating back to 1990 will support this statement. Now this is this date, the letter for the date, the letter that was dated, that was written to him was written on October 1987. So he's been fighting this battle now since 1990. This is 7 years to get somebody to accept who he says he is. He says, I am a black man at 5 levels.
All right now.
The biological, social, psychological, political, and ecological. And you need a logical. And I want to reconcile my strong black identity with my classification. Research shows that humanity originated in Africa. Research shows that the black race is the oldest race and the white race is the youngest. Research shows that all races have evolved from the black race through mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, and recombination. Research shows that civilizations originated in Africa. Research shows that the knowledge of the ancient Africans of Egypt has influenced and provided the foundation for all subsequent human knowledge. As a black man, as an African, I am proud of this heritage. My classification as a white man takes away my black pride and my black heritage. Again, part of my point is to emphasize the point about what the point is. Because sometimes we get distracted on what the struggle is about. For example, you might think, based on our activities of the last 40 years, the struggle was about civil rights. That's a tactic. That's not your goal. You know, that's a political necessity, but that's not your essence. That is not your spiritual direction. The need for freedom to pursue a spiritual direction is clear. But there are some people who don't know that the issue with us is that there are those who know what the issue is, who address it when they approach us by guaranteeing that we have no consciousness, that we have no sense of self, no independent sense of self. And they'll do anything that they can do in order to prevent us from having a sense of self. There is no argument, for example, over most of the things that we are attacked about. This business about whether the committed people were Africans or not, that's a stupid argument. But that's not the argument. The argument is that people like Hefney will make his connection and bond with people who are the descendants of his own people. The unity is the problem.
Right, all right.
It's not the content that's the problem. The content permits us to build unity. And it's the unity that people want to attack. You saw it again. Give you one more example. Because some beautiful women are sitting out here in this audience right now.
That's right.
Oakland, California.
All right.
And they don't like me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because by the time you go through this audience and find out who's here today, we have probably the greatest collection of Africans at the moment anywhere on the planet in this room. We got at least 5 conferences out there in the audience who will not be presented. On the 19th of December last year, the story broke about whether the Africans in Oakland spoke a language that came partly from Africa or not, which is called Ebonics. I know you heard about that. And for a whole 3 or 4 months, Oakland was savaged in the paper. I mean, they talked about them like they had tails on them. The dialogue was ignorant. It was an ignorant dialogue. Reporters were reporting on things that they knew nothing about. Black preachers were preaching on things they knew nothing about in the language that they were criticizing. Civil rights organizations, obviously with their agenda set by some friend on the board, because they have no education office, but they decided that this was the worst thing that could ever happen to black people, was to have some acknowledgement that you have any cultural element that allows you to be identified in any unique way whatsoever. And that ignorant position is still maintained. In fact, we had the NAACP in Georgia came into the Georgia legislature and testified on behalf of a black Georgia legislator who wanted to outlaw any response to the language, the mother tongue of African people in the public school. No matter what, whether you call it Ebonics or whether you call it standard English or non-standard, whatever you call it, you couldn't respond. That was the law that came out of the Georgia Senate. And the NAACP, I was testifying on the other side of that law. The NAACP was ordered, I think, by the National to come in and testify in favor of that legislation. Ignorant. Ignorant. Hadn't asked anybody. The almost 100% white linguistic society of America unanimously voted to support Oakland, while the blacks were sitting down talking about they're crazy. Do you understand what a mixed up mind will do? Especially when that mixed up mind is in a position of power. I'd like to point out, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, except the Oakland thing gives us a window on what the problem is. The problem in Oakland was that Oakland had the nerve to suggest that we were in some ways unique. It wasn't whether they spoke Ebonics or not. But you use the Ebonics argument to undermine the uniqueness, which undermines the unity and the solidarity. That's what the argument was about. You never saw Oakland. I bet how many people saw the teachers that teach in the program in Oakland? Anyone? Just raise your hand if you did. See? We only got a handful of people. Even in our, why? Because they never reported, never showed them. How many saw the children in the classes to find out whether those were good classes or not? See? There's some videos out on these now, but it's interesting that good reporters didn't find the time to go see the real deal. They just decided to repeat the ignorance that they heard. How many saw Ernie Smith on television explaining it? Yeah. Well, he's the one, he's the PhD in linguistics who is the mind behind the Ebonics program, along with Bob Williams. It seems like somebody who's going to report on this would go to the source. Right. Not secondary, tertiary information, primary source. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to say that 2 of the sisters who sat through the eye of the storm in Oakland are sitting 3, right out here. Would y'all stand up, please? Would y'all stand up? Carrie. I want you to know this, Sister Carrie, would you raise your hand? Sister Carrie is teaching one of the baddest teachers on the planet.
All right. Praise him.
Sister Nabia, would you raise your hand? The theoretician, one of the baddest theoreticians on the planet. I'm sorry, Sister Gwen, would you raise your hand? I want to explain why I asked these sisters to stand. See, because there is a phone number, and you ought to come give them some love when you get a chance. Give them a hug and get their phone number, because they have videotapes of these children reciting from memory all the sermons of Jeremiah Wright out of Chicago in standard English. They have Yana Van Sant's poetry that they memorize. These children have an incredible repertoire of things that they can recite. But not only recite, understand, Carrie will not allow the children to recite until they have understood what they're reciting. And when I was out in San Francisco the last time, you know what she treated me to? The children recited what? The teachings of the Tao. And they cannot recite it unless they understand it. Carrie is one of those teachers that reads better and more than most of the professors I know. She's already going back home. All of them going back home with books and things like that. We have a lot of teachers don't read anything. They wouldn't have known where the good African poetry was. You could be in an academic gifted high school, and if you think the classics means Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and so forth, and you don't think Africans have any classics, teachings of Tao, not classic, the oldest book on the earth.
That's the thing.
That's what the sisters read. She's going back home to read African World History Project. And that goes into the classroom. That's what they didn't want to have happen in Oakland. It had nothing to do with the kids. These kids, put your kids up against these kids and see what they can do in standard English. You see what I'm saying? So that the same people who didn't want us to be African before don't want us to be African now. The awakening of the African mind. A few of you probably have, there's a handout that looks like this, and I don't have enough for everybody, but there's about 50 or 60 of them around, and hopefully you would, hopefully what you would do is make copies. It's a two-sided thing, and on one side I have something called the 7 Messages of Saber. 7 messages that we're trying to send with this book. And on the other side, when I did one of the lectures in this book in Ghana, my brother Anderson Thompson sat there and he presented this about a year later. He gave me this diagram of what I had said. He put my whole lecture in symbols in meta-nature on one page. And it absolutely captures the essence of what I was trying to say in a better way than I did. In fact, I wish Anderson had given the lecture since he understood it so well. And then I could listen and find out what I was saying. But this handout, which is one way of trying to save some of what I would like to say about this Saber business. Because see, if the problem is the problem of identity, I think all problems come after that problem is solved. If you do not exist, you cannot function. You can't go anywhere if you don't exist. And when I say you, I mean we. I don't mean your individual you. I mean we as a people have to exist or we cannot go anywhere. You got a lot of us out trying to make alliances with people. You know, how are you going to make an alliance with someone when you haven't made an alliance with yourself? First, you have to exist make any kind of alliance that you want. So what happens is individuals go over and conclude treaties on our behalf, but they never spoke to us.
Right.
Because we didn't exist. They went because they were colored.
All right now.
In the book Saber, what I was trying to do were really 7 things to respond to this issue of what the problem is. One, I was trying in the first case to talk about the fact that our cultural basis is the tie that binds and is the source of our unity and power. That's the first message.
All right.
That unless we share a cultural base, notice I didn't say anything about a pigment base. That's obvious. And what they did as a trick was to get us off our course 200 years ago. They stopped us from talking about this cultural thing and tried to erase the memory of it. They said focus on some physical feature. Focus on some aspect of your phenotype, your pigment, your hair texture, your protruding buttocks, your elongated head, your prognosticism, your fleshy nose, and your soup-cooling lips. I might add, kissing lips. Y'all know you gotta have cushion if you're gonna do any serious kissing. Some people don't have no lips. And some other things they don't have. But it's not useful to sit down and contemplate the pigment, contemplate the booty, contemplate the lips and the nose and everything. That's not how human beings function. We had much more to do. What did those people with those booties, noses, lips, elongated head and hair texture, what did they create together? That's what we have to know something about. How did they understand themselves? That's what we have to know something about. As long as we're on that task, we will have enemies for days. Because those who seek to subvert us will try to destroy any awareness of the cultural, deep thought of the African community. And so I have 2 chapters in Saber that refer to that. One, the first chapter, which says Saber is the source of the Wahimi Masu. Wahimi Masu, in African language, in Medu Neter. In Medu Neter, Wahimi, repeat or repetition, Masu, the birth, the repetition of the birth, rather than say Renaissance. Marimba is very clear in one of her arguments about the need to use our language when talking about ourselves, talking about anything. And so we might as well go ahead and get or recreate the language if we need to, the Wahimi Masu. So if we intend to have a rebirth of our people, see, a lot of us are not clear about that issue. A lot of us don't want a rebirth. What we want is access to somebody else's system.
That's right. That's right.
A failing system at that. You say, just let us in, boss. You got this fine, well, just let us go to the hotel. If you just let us sit in there somewhere close by, we'll be happy. Just let us into the great books curriculum of the Western world, boss. If you just let us in there and study just like you do, we'll be happy. So they define their problem as access. I define our problem as existence. We first have to exist, then you can have access. If you go in to access without existence, you will be destroyed. Like the sister who said, the classics. Not a qualified, the European classic, the classics. As if nobody else has got classics. And as Jake says in I can't remember what's in that particular book, and that where he argues that if you go after the great books of the Western world, you have to understand that a large part of that was made deliberately to insult Africans.
Right.
When you begin to study Montesquieu's great book, and he sits down and it's anti-African, or Hegel's great book, and it's anti-African in the most vile sense of the word. And all you wanted was access so that you understood Hegel. Like other people understand Hegel. That's a sick mind. If that's a classic for you, that's not a classic for me. That's a classic lie. That's the only thing it can be. And so what that first chapter argues is that there has to be study. In other words, that we can't do what we did in the 60s. A lot of us in the 60s went out on a knee-jerk basis and we flailed away at anything that looked like a problem. But that's not how you fight wars.
That's right.
Wars are fought because you do homework. You get back in with yourself. You read what you know about yourself, what you know about your enemy, what you know about the situation. Then you plan strategies to get from here to there. We didn't do that. So we started out in our schools, protecting our schools, asking for money. And somebody said, you don't want money. What you want is integration. And we said, yeah, boss, that's what we want, all right. And we fought for it for 40 years. And didn't fight for what we should have been fighting for all along, because we hadn't done a strategic study of what needed to be done. So part of what that first chapter argues about is that we have to study in order to have our, quote, Renaissance hegemony. In other words, if we're going to recreate the African family, to me that is to reinforce, to nurture the African family. That's our primary responsibility. It takes study. And then I have a chapter called SEBA, Indigenous African Pedagogy from the Nile to the Niger. In native African schooling and socialization systems from the Nile River all the way across the continent to the Niger. I wanted to give some sense of how vast the contribution to ourselves has been of our ancestors who created powerful education and socialization systems and existed and brought us to where we encountered the slave and colonization society that destroyed our access to those institutions. And many of those institutions still exist. That's why Obinga is so important to us. Not just because he can read Metanetic. Obinga is important to us is because he comes from Congo and is in touch with indigenous African ways of doing things. And just when we opened this meeting, I had the great blessing to be introduced to a brother that I've admired for a long time from afar. I got introduced because I found Marimba reading his book. Somebody said, Marimba's using this book. That's all I need to know. If Marimba, I need to read the book, I need it. Somebody told me that. I got the book and I saw why. Name of the book, Kindizi, The Congo Art of Babysitting. A second book, Self-Healing, Old Teachings from Africa. By a brother that's so deep into this, they tell me that all the great art historians, like those at Yale, Robert Ferris Thompson and others, they got to get their information from him. If he wants to understand the deep structure of the socialization process of Africa. You can't be the same after you read this man 2 little thin books.
All right.
More profound than all the thick books you've ever seen in your life. And so I got a chance personally to greet him just before this started. And I want him to stand up because I think this is one of the most profound figures anywhere in socialization. His name, Kekia Bumseke Fukiao. Would you please stand? When I say SEBA, people say, what does SEBA mean? Small Business Administration? No. When I say SEBA, it means deep thought, study, teach. And it means that before we do knee-jerk anything, we ought to locate ourselves in our own cultural tradition. So that's what he helps us understand. I mean, I spoke about Dr. Fukiao's book in National Association for the Education of Young Children out in Seattle. they had a special meeting on how to teach. And I just introduced a little of the book in there because you know the American education system, in fact the whole European education system, has 3 domains that they function in. And that language was given to them by Professor Bloom from the University of Chicago. And he has a book called The Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. That's the definition of what is permissible to talk about. You can talk about education in terms of cognitive education. That's one domain, the affective domain, and the psychomotor domain. But Dr. Fukuyama said there's another domain.
All right.
There's this spiritual domain. We all have touched it. And the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor depend upon the spiritual.
That's right.
All right.
It says in Africa, in Europe, in the European, there's a book called The History of Childhood Quarter. You ought to read it so you can understand the difference in worldview.
All right.
Your worldview is everything, folks. And you have a worldview that a child is a piece of meat, that a child has no existence until they're 6 months old, that the personality hasn't formed until they get to be 8, 9, 10 years old. If that's your view of the child, you behave toward them in a certain way. But if, as they say in Congo, that when the child is conceived, that's the beginning of a living son, a cosmic divinity that will rise and set. And they have a book that Robert Ferris Thompson has called 4 Moments of the Sun. All of this coming out of Congolese worldview. When you begin to get into that and see how that requires you to treat your children, how it requires you to treat each other, then you'll see how much we have lost that's still accessible to us right now if we're willing to do what it says, to listen to those who have carried on the traditions of the ancestors. You know, we're a very unique people. We have access now to traditions that go to the Nile, to the Niger, to the Limpopo, to the Zambezi, where these pure forms of African culture that can teach us something are still available to us. Elizabeth Milton said, before the well runs dry, we have to learn from those who can teach us things. And so that's why I said it's important for us. You cannot answer the question of what to teach your children, what to teach each other, what your rites of passage should look like, when we haven't done the homework on the systems that we had and the systems that still exist. That's my first message. That the cultural base is the tie that binds. And that we have to do homework to put that piece back together again. And for that, we cannot get help from anybody. You understand what I'm saying? We are here in ASCAC, one of the few African organizations that does not take pennies. We do not take money from Nike. If you take money from them, they will have an interest in your agenda. Then you will say, as some great athletes who fly say, I can't say anything about their labor practices because everybody buys Nike. You understand what I'm saying? When you're independent, that's one of the lessons Dr. Ben taught us. When we first had ASCAC on this campus, Dr. Ben said, you will not go downtown and carry this into a hotel. You're not going to do it. When we finished, they had the food catered in by people out of the community. We met here on the campus we already paid for. Some people stayed in houses, and when we left here with $25,000 or $30,000 worth of profit, which they still. Put out a book, the World History Project, that looked like it was published by the University of Chicago Press. Without a penny of anybody's money but ours. That's why we make, Sister said I was giving up the big up more. Not because I got it, because I'm willing to sacrifice whatever it takes so that we can stay independent and don't have to beg anybody for anything. The second message of Saber that I was trying to send. The first is answered in chapters 1 and 5. Wade Noble said he likes chapter 5 best. I do too. Because I like to spend more time building than saying one more time that white supremacy is a mess. It is, and it's going to stay a mess, and it's going to stay.
Right.
So we don't need to deal with that as much as we do. We need to spend much more time. That's why people ask us. In fact, the brothers and sisters from London brought this book. This is the newest attack on us. Somebody named Steve Howe talking about Afrocentrism, mystical past, and imagined home. And I just said, don't worry about this. This is a piece of trash. I read it last night, and this man is a fool. It's worse than Lefkowitz's book, who also didn't know anything about what she was writing about. So we don't have to waste a whole lot of energy on this one. This looks like it's written by a committee somewhere with a computer, probably in the Heritage Foundation. You know, I don't know who did it, but this is junk. This is junk. I mean, they spend more time presenting the views of the critics, and they name everybody that they don't like. They name Jock, they name Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Carruthers, me, Lynn, everybody. They name everybody, but they don't deal with our stuff. They can't deal with the stuff. So all they say is these people look like they are connected. Let me tell you what else they say. They say not only are they connected, but they seem to be connecting worldwide. That's what the problem is. The problem is not what we say about Kemet, Cleopatra. You can have her. Nefertiti, you can have her too. You can have both those women. I don't care anything about her. Don't need her. Wasn't none, no way. They don't care what we say about that. They really don't care. What they care is about the connection. When they see you getting together. Why? Because if you get together, they can't take Africa again. You understand what I'm saying? So the second message had to do with the fact that we are not going anywhere until we have geopolitical sophistication. All right. That means we have to understand not only that we were oppressed, but how we were oppressed.
Right, exactly.
That we were oppressed, but that we are still being oppressed. That Africa is still being colonized, being recolonized at this very moment. People have designs on that continent because they need it. Japan needs it. China needs it. America needs it. Europe needs it. Yeah. They need the natural resources, but they don't need the people. That's right. And the people are in the way, and it's hard to get rid of them if they are connected. That's what the agenda is. And so I talk about that. There's a brother in the room who wrote one of the most sophisticated little short pamphlets, Brother Nantambo. Yeah. I don't know where he is right now, but Brother Nantambo wrote a little book called Decoding European Geopolitics. You ought to get that little book. Because you can finish the sentence once you see how it started. Once you see how you approach the analysis of geopolitics. What we've been is a local people in a global world. Yeah. The whole world is consolidating global power, and we're sitting up talking about, I'm Trinidadian. I'm from Atlanta. I'm from Philly. Well, yeah, if that's where you're from, then you finish. Because the rest of the world will use you in any way that they choose to use you. And so the cultural genocide piece is in there. And also the deification of oppressive culture is in there. That's the two-pronged strategy to destroy African community. One, to destroy the culture. Two, to pump up white supremacy through culture. That's why Hirsch wrote the book Cultural Literacy. They said we better shore up and set out in detail what it is that we want people to learn, what the classics are. That's what they did. They had to restate the classics. That comes out every now and then. They had it once before with the great books of the Western world. As soon as y'all get black studies, then they go get the great books of the Western world. As soon as y'all get a revival of black studies, African studies especially, then you get cultural literacy. Do you understand? So, because most of us aren't tracking the strategy that's being used against us. We don't even know what the problem was. The problem, when they told Theodore Roosevelt in Brazil, they told him the problem is that black people exist. Wow. That's the problem. It's in the book. I give the exact quote where they said the problem is that black people exist. They exist in America, they exist in South America. We got two ways to solve the problem. The first way to solve the problem in South America, the way we do it is the way you ought to do it, Theodore Roosevelt. You ought to kiss them out of existence. You ought to pretend to integrate. But no matter how much we integrate, we will still be white. This is the actual language that they said, that black people will become absorbed into the white population, become white. And of course, you can go to Brazil and see whether that happened or not. So they claim that's what the answer is. It said, now, Theodore Roosevelt in America, you are segregating people. And what that will do is temporarily it'll hurt, but it will lead them connected. And if they're connected, then they can become a force. You understand? So one day you will learn what we have learned. They have now learned what Teddy Roosevelt didn't learn. Because the new strategy, as Hefney demonstrates, through the census, through attacks on African studies and so forth, is to make sure we never have the information about ourselves that would allow us to be connected. Connection is the problem. The third message has to do with whitening. You'll find that in chapter 2, which is European hegemony and African identity. And that's where I give you that information about Theodore Roosevelt. And also about the update, because Theodore Roosevelt's the early part of the century. I give you a study in there where they're studying whether or not it's possible to take kids out of the ghettos and put them into upper-class private schools and turn them into another cultural being through the education process. I got the exact quote here. And you know what they found out? The answer was, they can. You can manufacture as many Clarence Thomases as you need. Through the socialization process. And they say the people who we train in these schools can become equal to, they say even better than many of the people that they're competing against, even if they come out of the housing project. They know the bell curve doesn't work. They said, but what we want them to do is to leave behind family, friends, and the whole black subculture as a whole. In those words, I got the actual quote in there. Because we're connected. And then the fourth message, oh, by the way, they had a name for this strategy called whitening. Whitening. Idea that you whiten the blood of the country by having fewer black people around, more European people around, in miscegenation, whatever that is. And that over time, the white will dominate, and then you'll have a white country. That's the goal. And they say the problem that we have is the existence of the Negro. And that we get rid of the problem of the existence of the Negro by making sure that there are no Negroes around, by integrating them out of existence. Number 4. The fourth message is that African independent educational aims in the past are a response to hegemonic miseducation. What do we do when we got miseducated? We didn't sit down and take it. You need to read both of Carter Woodson's books about that. One called The Education of the Negro. The other called The Miseducation of the Negro. There are two of them. Education came first. And you can see that he had to do miseducating after he did education. You read James Anderson's book, on the history of Negro education in the South in order to understand what the response of the Africans was to the problem of hegemony, what they understood, this hegemonic problem. What was the response? The response of the Africans to the hegemonic problem was to create independent schools. They had hundreds of independent schools during slavery that nobody knew about, that popped out in 1865. All of a sudden they popped up, as they say. 500 and more before they stopped counting of the independent education institutions in the South, all over the South. Africans taxed themselves to pay for their teachers and created schools before the Freedmen's Bureau. So they said, we better control this. You can't have that. Let's offer them a donation. Let's send in the missionaries. Let's send in the Freedmen's Association. Let's send in the philanthropists. Then we will be able to engineer the course of the Africans' education process. So we say African independent educational aim in the past, we responded to. For example, in Charles Hamilton's essay in the Harvard Educational Review, you need to read this, in the 60s, he wrote, Race and Education, A Search for Legitimacy. And that chapter, I did a review of that chapter as one of the chapters in this book. In fact, that's chapter 3, Africans and the Search for Legitimacy. He said that when he surveyed, he went around with his little pencil asking principals, what do you want? Back in the 50s and 60s, what do you want? He asked teachers, what do you want? You know, we had associations of professional teachers, black teachers. He asked, what did you want? Parents, what do you want? He said, when he finished, he said, we found that there's a fundamental difference between what black people want and what white people want. He said, white people want efficient schools. Same curriculum. You got it? They thought the problem was that we didn't get high enough scores on the test that they were giving. They thought the problem was that we thought we weren't let in to the classics. So they're going to let us into the classics. But that they would do it more efficiently. They defined the problem as efficiency. That's why busing was the answer to the problem of efficiency of education. He said, but when I'm talking to these Africans, they're challenging the legitimacy of the whole process. Do you understand that that's a different position? Look how bright, how brilliant we were. We saw it in a flash, and then somebody came in and obscured that part. They said, no. We'll take. You don't really want to question the legitimacy. When they said legitimacy, they meant two things in addition to high standards. They meant high academic standards. They also meant a bond between the community and the school. That the schools had to belong to the community. That's what they said. And the curriculum had to include African content. That's what they were asking for in the beginning. And then they were taken off that path, and they would say, all you really want is to be bused, so that you can be resegregated in an integrated school through the tracking system and the special education system. I go into this in some detail on what actually happened. There's another chapter in there called 40 Years After Brown, Now What? That looks in detail at how we got off track. Because we weren't doing SEBA. We had not gotten into the study of what we knew. Look, do you understand that we had the best education system on the planet? Do you understand? When you read Dr. Fukiao's book and see, and when you read Bassi Anda, who just died, I understand, in Nigeria, in his book, Educational Anthropology, and when you read what the Dogon are doing, Finch's new book, Finch has a new book out, and you got to get this one. This is a bad read, called Star of Deep Beginning, Charles Finch's new book. In fact, I have a copy of it right here. And when you read what it is that we already knew there, and when you look at this is his new book, Star of Deep Beginning, and when you look at the African independent education tradition, it'd be hard to find another school like Morehouse College, as far as academic achievement is concerned. It'd be hard to find something that can outdo spelling. They regularly rank up there with Harvard and Yale and stuff like that. It'd be hard to look at a school like Tougaloo College, which has open admissions and produces 40% of the black lawyers in Mississippi. It'd be hard to argue with that. It'd be hard to argue with Shabazz's outstanding work in producing PhD mathematicians in America, more than anybody else in the world ever done. We know how to do that stuff. We also knew how to socialize our children. So we didn't have that problem. Now people got us thinking that we don't know how to solve the problem. And so we're sitting down at other people's feet asking questions like, how do I educate the at-risk child?
Right.
Africans sit down asking that question. I said, who is the at-risk child? See, somebody stopped them from knowing who they were. Didn't say, how did you educate the African child? How do you educate the at-risk child? That's just one of the strategies to separate Africans from who, the identity that they are. And once you do that, everything is off. Everything is false. The fifth message is that we've been off our path for 40 years. Off our path. That we started out where Charles Hamilton found us, asking for legitimacy, and then we switched our agenda to efficiency. And we stopped asking the question about, are the schools legitimate? Are they really telling us the truth? Are they really educating us in our own interest? We stopped asking those questions. I don't mean everybody. Obviously, folk in here have been asking those questions all along. And then I have a sixth message that in spite of all the problems, that we have the power, even now, with no money, to do anything that we want to do. Anything that consciousness dictates, we can do. That's the beauty of this. I don't know. You never tried to write a book. I mean, I can, if I want to talk nonsense, I can get any of my books published anywhere I want to get them published. No problem. But the minute you say something serious, suddenly there's no market for that. You understand? That's why it's necessary. There's no market for this book in the main publishers. They don't want that book. That's why we have to publish the book. But guess what? Just because there was no market, just because we didn't have a publisher, didn't mean that we could outdo all the publishers and all the markets with our book. So we produced it because we wanted to produce it. We produced it out of nothing. It's like ASCAC. You would think for everything that we've been doing, not just this book, but all the position papers, all the conferences, all the workshops, all of that, you would think that ASCAC had millions of dollars. And when you go to the office, you would think it would be at least as large as City College. It's about as big. Where the office? It's in the basement. Yeah, you're in Nzinga's basement. That's where you are. We don't have any money. We don't have any budget. All we got is power. You understand that? That power comes because we're independent and because we're unified. And so there's a chapter that says purposeful transformation, which outlines how we can even take the existing raggedy system and make it work. You know, we can take public schools, and if we put the right power on them, we can make them do some of the things that we want them to do. The one thing they can't do is socialize our children because they're public. And the only people that can socialize in Africa are independent Africans. That means old wise people have to be in charge of the process. They cannot be asking Nike or the governor for permission to organize the system that we want. You can't even take the energy to get into that argument. If you start taking money for this piece, that's why people start talking about rites of passage, then they go into some corporation to fund it. I know it's easier. I know it's easier, but the corporation will not fund the rites of passage. They can't do it. So we have to do that ourselves. I would rather have a poor, right socialization process than a rich, wrong one.
Right, exactly.
The last chapter in Saber is a chapter that deals with homework. And so it was just my way of trying to identify some of the kinds of reading that we have to do. There's certain reading that you've got to do if you're doing Saber, if you're doing African deep thought. There's certain books you cannot be an African if you haven't read Marimba Ane's book. You cannot be an African if you haven't read J. Carruthers' Medu Nectar. That's serious stuff. If you haven't read Ayikwe Armaz, 2000 Seasons, and especially Osiris Rising. There's certain things that will shape the images, that will chart the direction, that will keep us on course, that we have to read. That doesn't mean you don't read anything else. Read everything else. You know, people accuse us of being narrow in our focus. Black folk read everybody's literature. Most of the people I know, Runoko Rashidi is all over the world. Reading anything he can get his hands on. And they mad about that. He started coming back with the information they didn't want him to have. And so you start raising all kind of questions. You say, you mean white supremacy is a global system, not just local? And they're keeping information out about every African anywhere? And here you keep digging it up. You're not supposed to do it. So it seems to me that the awakened African mind, what do we mean by that? You say reawakening of the African mind. The one thing we mean is that the mind is still there. It's not gone anywhere. It's just been anesthetized, been put to sleep. You know, after so long of being disconnected, you know, you dry up and you go to sleep. You roll up into this little corner. All it takes is somebody to come along with a little water, a little fertilizer. The next thing you know, that sleeping mind begins to wake up. You've seen it, haven't you? You've seen people have a certain experience and be transformed in front of your eyes. People you thought were lost forever. It was there all the time. That African mind is there. And so it just needs to be awake instead of sleep. Because to sleep you can't do anything. So it means that we have to first, the African mind that's awake has a whole lot of questions. The awake African mind questions everything and anybody. I don't care who they are, including Africa.
That's right. That's right.
You got to question everybody, right, Mario? Anybody. You got to question all the Babas. No Baba is beyond question. All the founders of ASCAC, they got to be questioned. I'm talking about an awake mind now. But see, there's a lot of people taking our tradition, especially chemists. As soon as they get a few words of meta-nature and a couple of pieces of cloth that look like the old people, then the next thing you know, they turn it into a pimping thing. And all of a sudden, you got something that ain't what it's supposed to be. That's got to be questioned. You got to be questioning everything. And when somebody tells you you can't ask questions, you're in the wrong room. Somebody asked me and said, well, you have to be in the ASCAC religion to come to ASCAC meetings. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I said, you obviously don't know ASCAC. We're fussing and fighting with each other all the time. We just have this umbrella of love that allows us to hang together even when we disagree with each other.
Exactly.
So there's no religion in ASCAC. See? Not in the sense that we understand. Some of us are committed, whatever you think your religion is, to that great organizing African principle you find all over the continent, Ma'at. And if you're against that, then I question your religion. So the questioning, that's what I mean by an African mind. Then there are certain habits that an African mind has.
All right.
We have to be able to answer certain questions habitually. Booker T. Washington Coleman is the one, I'm paraphrasing and modifying his question list. But it hit me one day when he said it. It was awesome. The effect that it had on me for him to say it at that time just supposed to be able to answer. These are the questions that our enemies don't want us to answer. Who, he says, who am I? Where did I come from? How in the world did I get here? You know, he said, who in the world am I? Where in the world did I come from? How in the world did I get here? He got those questions. So I extended it a little bit, and I acknowledge my debt to him for this. But let me just say, I'd like to have us frame it this way. And if we had a habit of trying to answer these questions, because you can't answer them forever, because we keep getting new information.
That's right.
So you ask the question, who are we? That's the one question oppressors don't want you to answer. We'll tell you, Hefty, who you are. You are a white man. That's what you are. And if you don't shut up, you will lose your job.
Yes.
We will tell you who you are.
Yes.
So we have to be able to answer, who are we?
Teach.
Where did we come from? There are people who don't want you to know that. That's why they stop history as slavery.
That's right.
I went to school, and you did too, in most cases, where you didn't have a history before. You don't get mentioned in the curriculum until before slavery.
Exactly.
Well, that means they can't be teaching the truth. That means the curriculum can't be true. It can't be legitimate, as Hamilton said. So where did we come from? And don't tell me Philly. How in the world did we get here? Okay. They don't want us to answer those questions. When I started laying out, that's why I started working with longitudinal timeline. Plotting African life episodes on a timeline. Laying them out in front of you. One brother out of Baltimore, Osei Owusu, got this 12-foot time chart that started 250,000 years ago. And wow, that's a devastating piece of information for some people. They can't handle it because they don't have a timeline like that. We're the only one got that one.
All right.
But it's not to dominate anybody with our timeline, it's to clarify us with our timeline. That's why we need it. So where in the world did I come from? How did I get here? Why did I get here? That's the geopolitical question, isn't it?
Right.
Why in the world did I get here?
Yeah.
There's answers to these questions, wherever here is. If here is Belize, if here, Baba Rashidi is Indian with the Dravidians, how and why did we get here?
All right.
Why? Where are we going? People don't want us to ask this question. I think it's a legitimate question if you exist. If you don't exist, no point in asking the question. If you're a hitchhiker, hey, if you are a spectator at somebody else's ball game, you don't need to ask these questions. But if I have a destiny, a destination, what does it mean in the 1990s to be a person or people in the world with no destination? What does that mean? There's something sick about that. There's something crippled about that. There's something disabled about that. So it seems to me that we have to work on that problem. We have to provide answers. That's what I mean by the awakened mind. The sleep mind doesn't need to ask that question. The sleep mind says, I wonder who's going to be president. I wonder, will Clinton do better than Bush? No. Both of them got their own agenda. We think we got to choose. I have to choose nothing. Choose destiny.
Yes.
Then you make up your decision who's going to do something for you minute by minute, because it changes. Their agenda changes. One minute he's dumping on Jesse Jackson in order to develop a Southern strategy. Next minute he's dumping on Sister Soldier. Then after the election, embracing Vernon Jordan, embracing everybody. Well, what is it? Which is it? Which one? Well, I shouldn't have to answer that question. How did it happen? How did people get us where we are and then take our minds and put them on hold, put them in neutral, anesthetize them? There's an answer to that question. going to show you some overhead, but it's going to take a little while, so I won't do that. I'll just tell you that there is a strategy for putting minds to sleep. Hide the information.
Yeah.
That will put a mind to sleep. That means a curriculum in which you're not in it will put a mind to sleep. Do not allow people to feel connected to each other. That means take their name so they can't have a connection. Take their culture and trash it so that they cannot practice the culture. Make people ashamed if they worship Olodumare. Call it voodoo. You see? Trivialize it. Call it pagan. Call it savage. See? Pagan and savage is anything you don't believe in. And you're a pagan and savage. If you believe somebody is pagan and savage, to somebody else, you're pagan and savage because you don't believe in what they believe in. But the Africans, by making us ashamed of the worldview and ashamed of the drum drums call the spirits. I closed my eyes today when the brother, he helped me meditate to get ready to do what I had to do here.
Right.
They said, no, you can't have that because that's savage and tribal. One of the most sophisticated, intergenerating, communicating devices ever known to man, the African drum. And they tell us to shut them down. I'm trying to say what this self-study, this habit of self-study, we have to stay on these questions all the way. Can it happen again?
Yes.
Can they, see, the fact, it's still happening, but I'm still going to ask, can it happen again?
Yes.
Can we go into slavery again?
Absolutely.
In 1 year, admissions to the medical school in California dropped to 0. Can it happen again? Law school admissions dropped to 3 in the whole state of California for Africans. Can it happen again? It's already happening again. Already happening again. When we had our ASCAC in Ghana, I was happy because we have Africans on the faculties over there. Started ASCAC chapter. We were received by the president. We met almost all of the chiefs. Baba Jeffries got them all together. They came down. They met our young people. And they talked to us. They talked about the Tower Return Foundation that they want to build. To acknowledge and to ask us to come home again to the Cape Coast. You can get free land there if you want. Africans reaching out across the oceans to us. And at the same time, I cried because I saw the biggest billboards in the smallest community headed up toward Kumasi were the churches, many of them white, who were in a battle for the minds and souls of the Ghanaians with no respect for any of the theological thousands of years of African history whatsoever. You can belong to anything you want to. I don't care what you belong to. Why you got to trash Ghana? Why you got to trash Nigeria? Why you have to trash anything African? Do what you want to do. But why you got to say Africans are not legitimate? Oh, there, and then little African man, little Ghanaian man on the bus, he kept talking about, well, you know, there's the fetish priest. I said, who's the fetish priest? I said, you talking about the Catholic father? He got no cross. He got a little incense and he's swinging back and forth. He's throwing holy water on people and everything. I said, you call the African a fetish priest? I said, come on, give me a break. I said, you don't have to, if you want to be Catholic, fine. But why you got to trash the African? This is a young man talking about his mother, his father, his grandparents. There's something wrong with that. And we know that many of the people who are in there trying to colonize that mind have in mind that they will be like those in Hawaii who went there with a Bible and came back with a pineapple plantation. It's happening again, folks. What must I do to reach our destination What do we have to do to get to? It's one thing to set a destination, but Sister Joyce King told you yesterday something about praxis. That thinking without acting ain't nothing.
There you go.
That's like James Brown, who also said it before Joyce King. Talking loud, saying nothing. It's amazing how much wisdom our people have. And then, of course, the awakened mind is one that acts because it's mobilized and organized. And I can't take a lot of time with that because my time is about up. But the awakened mind is also, listen to this now, strategic and tactical.
Right.
Strategy and tactics. We got some people who can think about, it's one thing to know, oh no, I'm just going to go get it done. Sometimes it's good just to be silent. That's what Patao teaches. A lot of times you win your battle just by shutting up. At other times you have to act because the moment is pregnant. And you can put your finger on a spot. And you don't have to knock the whole head off. You just touch a little spot and you're disable.
Right, exactly.
If you're strategic. If you're not strategic, the moment passes. And then there's a lot of things we knew about. For example, in Portland, Oregon, we knew that we didn't have forever to produce baseline essays. We knew that when people finally read our story, that was not the story they wanted out because it connects Africans in America to Africans on the continent. They didn't want that. It connects us to time. It connects us to space. That's why they didn't want those essays. We knew that they weren't going to, when they found out eventually they would come for the essay, they did. Fired the board, got rid of the lady who ran the program, did not republish the, so we knew that. But by then, the damage had already been done. They already out in the Caribbean, over in Africa, out in China. I get letters from Japan where people read those essays by Dr. Clark, Hunter Adams, who also wrote that with Carl Spike, Shashi, McIntyre, right here in New York City. See, we knew that it won't last forever, but we were strategic. We took advantage of the time and the place. We were tactical. That was not our end product. Our end product is not to change school curriculum. Our end product is to leverage whatever we have to change the socialization curriculum in our community. That curriculum that we should have the responsibility for. We have to take charge in order to do that. And so, if we do SEBA, that means study, then it means that we will not be functioning willy-nilly. We will not look like crazy people running around with our hands up in the air. We will not be overwhelmed by seeming power. You look around, people say, how in the world do you think, with all the faculties of history and all the publishers, Dr. J, how do you think that you can possibly have an impact on the curriculum of the world? Just ask the people, why are they writing books about us? Nobody else. Why are they writing books about us and nobody else? I mean, Mary left it. She got to come out of some stupid training process out of, where is it? Brown University. Well, yeah. She should have gone up to Brown University. Brown is where she and Finch had their debate. Did y'all know that they debated? You're not going to know. They're not going to show that on TV. They're not going to show her getting a behind whip from one end of the campus to the other on TV. They found out when they had Dr. Clark and he did what he did that you're not supposed to let that out over TV. I have the paper that Finch did. It's really brilliant paper. When he finished with her, she came down after the thing was over. She said, well, I've learned a lot. If our little thing is so raggedy, why you got to put billions behind it? Because it was the Olin Foundation that paid for Lefferts, the same foundation that paid for closing of the American Mind. If this stuff is so trivial, why you got to write books about how dumb we are? Sponsored by billionaires in the Bradley Foundation out of Milwaukee. Why they got to pay that? In order to get the word out. Why do Schlesinger's book, Disuniting of America, and put the Federal Express stamp on every other page and then send it to all the Fortune 500 coordinators. Why we got to do that if we're not saying anything? Because we are. Let me conclude this with a piece of poetry from an African who's not with us anymore, but you probably knew, if you knew me, that I was going to do this. Because you know how much I love Listerveld.
Yes.
And Listerveld is one of the only uncompromising poets that we have.
Come on. All right. Come on.
You read his first book, Fatback and Caviar. Read his other book, We Be Creosote People. Read his book, Southern Wind, African Breeze. And then there are about 4 or 5 major poems that were never published. This one is the last one that he wrote that was never published. And you will find a common theme all the way through all his poetry. No compromise. We say, excellence, Sister Nzinga, without compromise. That's what it says, without compromise. You'll hear it here, no compromise. And it's really what we're talking about in terms of this curriculum, this SEBA, this study, this teaching. He summed it up, and he addressed his remarks to the children. I think those remarks should be addressed to all of us. So where he says children, we have to all put ourselves in that position because that's what we are, children. So Listerveld talking to each one of us as he talks to the children. And the title of his poem is called The Charge. The Charge. It said, black children, first children of the Virgin Mother, we celebrate you. We celebrate your birth. We celebrate your divinity. We bring you gifts of frankincense and myrrh. We bring you golden sandals, not Reeboks, not Nikes, golden sandals, like the ones made for rulers, like the ones made eons ago for the boy king Tutankhamun and for Hatshepsut when she was just a girl child. And besides, hoop dreams are not worthy of you. They have no power. They are what is left after dreams are gone. They are the shell without the yolk. They are the flesh without the soul. For no man or woman who is free to chase stars is satisfied chasing a ball. No man or woman who has ruled himself or herself is satisfied being ruled by others. Black children, first children of the Virgin Mother, the world that witnessed your birth is no longer the idyllic garden of the first generation. Your eyes must focus quickly because there's little time to crawl. Your hands must be put to the work of men and women, not to the games of children. Your mind to the challenge rising on the horizon of human consciousness, the Europeanization of human thought. Your charge is to stop the spread of European consciousness, Europe's control over the minds of African people. We are prisoners of European consciousness, trapped behind enemy lines, barbed wire inside European paradigm, barbed wire inside European space and time. Look up at the heavens, and what names for the stars and planets come to mind? Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Mercury, Venus, Neptune, Uranus, all European gods. Virtual monuments in the sky, reminding us of European greatness. Now, cast your eye downward. Behold the plants and the animals of the earth. They all bear Europe's Latin and Greek imprints. Black children, we must not be the people who walked but left no footprint, who talked but had nothing meaningful to say, who labored but built nothing for themselves. So, we lay at your feet the builder's spade and shovel, the mason's trowel and square, Africa's books of wisdom. Go now. Build for eternity.
All right.
There you go.
Yes.
Are we happy? Are we ready to work? Are you ready to build? I have the second vice president here, Dr. Leonard Jeffries is full himself. I'm telling you, that was excellent, Dr. Jeffries. That was excellent. I was commenting to Jerome, I said, Asa was in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago. He's a man on a mission. I mean, you and your cousin Jake got it down. Y'all on it, okay? I'd like to introduce, actually, let me get through it. Who lost their book? Their brains. I knew it. North Carolina, come on down. Hey, just one out of North Carolina. Everybody else got theirs. He's organized. At least your name was in it. That's good. Okay, and then there's another case. We'll have it in the back, but there's nothing in this little camera case. All right, brother man. North Carolina obviously is in the house. Yeah. Bowling Green here. Did Bowling Green get here? I don't know where Bowling Green is. But we have another man in the house. Black man from the Nile. Taught us last night. Wants to come up and just say a few words before I do the program schedule. So I want our brother to join us right now. Black man from the Nile, warrior, general, in the army, in the battle to win the hearts and the minds of